10th of August 2022. In this one, of this and that, and what the fuck, I'm going to talk about the pestilence and a little bit about what's going on with funny things that is happening in Ukraine. And on this day, my day started like this. You can't like this. Got it. That's what Twitter tells me when I try to like a post. Well, and this is the post. 76,000 deaths and 8 million injuries after the snake poison. Now you must read most of the stuff there yourself for various reasons that we all know. I cannot do it. But if you look at those numbers there, it is really, really, really scary. And then take note of that little warning at the bottom there with a red triangle. And this is how this thing was pushed past. And then I did here a close-up so that you can see that warning better. But look at that totals. It is scary. And then come to this guy. He made this post, currently charging my Tesla electric car at work for free. The current Merseyside power grid carbon intensity is 198 grams of CO2 per kilowatt. The car has averaged 2.6 miles per kilowatt, and then he gives a lot of numbers and things like that. And my response to him was, let me bust your bubble. One puff from a volcano and your contribution goes up in smoke for the next million years. And I can tell you there was a lot of responses to this post. And it was hilarious in many instances. And then we get to this. The EU is discussing the introduction of sanctions against Turkey due to rapprochement with Russia, writes the Financial Times. Several Western officials told the publication that they were concerned about the promise of the leaders of Turkey and Russia to expand cooperation in the field of trade and energy after their meeting in Sochi. And this is something that, if I allow myself a free rein, I would start swearing. But what is the issue here? These people do not want to live in peace and in prosperity. No, they only want war, aggression, and war, aggression, and war. And then there's this one. Belarus is the main exporter of buses to Russia. Belarusian mazes are the second most popular among Russian carriers after the domestic cars, reports Sputnik. Russian-made buses are bought by 62% of consumers, 22.5% prefer Belarusians. In third place are the product of the Chinese automotive industry. In the last month alone, 203 new buses from Belarus were bought in Russia. And while the world is going crazy and the collective West is battling with the effects of their own sanctions against Russia, it seems to me that Russia and the people in the East is carrying on with life. Now this next one is quite important. Russia has set a trend to abandon the dollar. At the talks in Sochi, Putin and Erdogan agreed to switch to trading in national currencies. Earlier, similar agreements were reached with Iran and other major partners of Russia. In 2022, Moscow, friendly Armenia and Belarus have already switched to full payment for gas in rubles, and the share of trade in national currencies with Azerbaijan has exceeded 30%. With other countries, and then there's this, sanctions nullified by Russia-China trade. Chinese exports to Russia are skyrocketing, filling the void created by sanctions and the exodus of Western brands, as the Chinese Customs Authority reports a jump of 1/3 from July. Shipments to Russia have grown 22% as bilateral trade reaches 97.7 billion, up 29% on a yearly basis. It's expected that the foreign trade between China and Russia this year would surpass the level of 2021, when the bilateral trade stood at 146.8 billion, a record high. And all of this is losses for the West. And a lot of that losses is for the EU. And here is one from Iran. Tehran confirmed correct operation of all subsystems of the Qayyam satellite. It is planned that it will fly over Iran 4 times every 24 hours. And that is the one that I spoke about in my previous Skidmark that Russia launched for Iran. And then we get to NATO. NATO supports Ukraine but is not going to become a party to the conflict. It's necessary to avoid the spread of hostilities to other countries. Now this is an old one that I dug up this afternoon. And this is what they said in May. And yes, they did not join the fight formally, but they are in there all the way, just not in person. And then there's this one. Reminder of how trash NATO army is. Their conditions for Serbia were capitulation and NATO army in Serbia. They were to make a new government. They achieved not one of those objectives, only killed 3,000 civilians. That's NATO strength versus Serbia, that has 7 million people. And then he's not kind to NATO. And then we get to an interesting one. This happened when you are defeated, but you are evil enough to make your defeat a zero-sum game of a global scale. Thoughts aloud. AFU's deliberate shelling of the nuclear power plant. Western powers can easily stop Ukrainian shelling of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant with just one phone call, but they don't do that. They hope Russia, having a looming threat of a nuclear disaster from AFU's deliberate strikes, will withdraw from Energodar. This intention is indirectly confirmed by the White House calling on Russia to pass the power plant under Ukrainian control. The purpose of the shelling is exactly this one. Washington doesn't care about the nuclear catastrophe. It would be too far from the US. The Ukrainian shelling of the plant, and irresponsible, if I can't have it, then nobody else will, approach creates a feeling that the Ukraine side feels alright with making a huge territory of Ukraine uninhabitable and the remaining part adhering to Poland. This happens when you are defeated, but you are evil enough to make your defeat a zero-sum game of a global scale. And how true is that? And then we get to some other politics. Get used to it. Many white people had enough. Not tolerated. Huge white lives matter sign blasted after it appears over a Scots city. And yes, as I said previously, the white race is the only race against which you can be racist without any problems. And then we get this one. And this one says a lot. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of waves about this. Islamic rape of Europe. Polish magazine places white Europa girl groped by migrant hands. And it is true. And it is happening. And the people on the ground experience this. But the media will always suppress it. I'm quite surprised that this actually saw the light of day. And then this one. Who is really defending democracy? Assange is imprisoned in London, while Snowden is free in Moscow. You can make of that what you want. And then this one makes me want to puke. This isn't normal. WEF. Decriminalize sex with children. The global elites are normalizing pedophilia. Governments across the world operating under the control of the WEF are waging war on our children. We better be alert. They are planning horrors for our children. And then we get this one. Erdogan and Assad may hold Putin broker talks. The leader of Turkey and Syria could hold telephone talks after it was suggested by Russian President Putin. Turkish state media reported Tuesday, citing sources within the Ankara government. The news comes after Erdogan's visit to Sochi last week, where he discussed the issue of Syria with Putin. The Turkey newspaper reports that after the meeting, Putin recommended Ankara work as much as possible with the Assad government to combat terrorism as much an approach would be much more accurate. Erdogan and Putin reaffirmed their commitment to the political process in Syria and agreed it was important to maintain the political unity and territorial integrity of the Middle Eastern nation and vow to act together in full coordination to fight any terrorist organizations. This is an interesting development because, as we know, Russia supports Assad, and Erdogan is in the north. He took a buffer zone there, but the Americans are there too. And after the Iran visit, Putin stated that they want the American troops to move out of Syria. Let's see what's going to happen there. I think between these two, they might get something going and sort that horror story out for once and for all. And then there's this. Once again, Ukraine should have been encouraged to become neutral, German opposition leader. Alice Weidel, the head of German Alternative for Germany party, believes that when talking about the Ukrainian conflict, one has to keep in mind historical background and Russia's justified security interests. And I spoke about this previously. This is something that was not given much airtime by the media, but I'm actually glad to see there are politicians that are now willing to speak up. And then we get to this one. Now this is very interesting. Warsaw will deploy all cannons to disrupt EU. As the EU freezes billions of euros in funding to the country, Polish politicians have vowed to open fire at the EU and form a coalition to oust EU leader Ursula von der Leyen, as it accused the body of subjugating Poland to Berlin's will. The bloc disapproves of Warsaw's rule of law reforms, which it claims is pushing the country to authoritarianism, and is withholding 35 billion euros in pandemic relief, prompting officials to be guided by "you reap what you sow" principles in discussions with the body. Amid calls to exit the Union, Poland does not rule out any possibilities. I wonder what's going to happen here. But I think there's a lot of countries, maybe not a lot, but there is a number of countries, especially of the Eastern European countries, that are beginning to think about how practical it was to be in the EU. And then, from Russia, Maria Zakharova, the USA wants Africa to side with them so badly that they are sending Anthony to sweet talks SA, DRC and Rwanda to being allies with the USA. Africa as a whole should side with Russia. Many African countries wouldn't have their independence if it wasn't for Russia. And yeah, there's a lot of truth in that. And this is just a little bit of information. This is the Russian drone, the heavy attack drone, Sirius. And then here is a lot of information about that drone, and I'm not going to read all of it. The Kronstadt Group confirmed plans to start flight tests of the new Sirius heavy attack drone, according to the group's CEO. The drone will take off in the near future. The company is preparing a prototype of the strike Sirius for the first flight. Russia is not totally in the Stone Age as many wanted us to believe in February. And here is something that just made me smile. Russian hackers from the Killnet group carried out an attack on the control system of the American military industrial corporation Lockheed Martin, the very one that supplies HIMARS. As a result of the attack, the services that provide internal work and logistics are dead. And then it lists the services that are down. And this is one that I spoke about in a previous Skidmark. Just a reminder, this is what Rwanda is doing for its citizens in the rural areas. They call them model villages. Each family gets a free furnished house, a dairy cow poultry project and irrigated land. These model villages have a SCH, that's a school and clinic on site. This is a real empowerment, not some propaganda. And the houses are there, and then here on the right hand side is where the facilities are for the livestock. I like that a lot, and I did quite an extensive thing on it previously. And then we get to the UK. This is Manchester. Apparently looks like a foreign country, but at least We're not speaking German. Guys, that is supposed to be England. And I grew up on a mine property where all the officials were English. I know what an Englishman looks like. Does not look like that. And then we come to that moment. What a fuck. And this is actually a tragedy. But you have to look at it and think. And when after it, you'll have to say to yourself, what a fuck is this? Worldwide, a higher percentage of people consider the US government to be the biggest threat to world peace than think any other nation's government is. It's not because America is a democracy, but because it isn't. Ukraine before and after Putin invaded. And then you see those pictures. And then at the bottom, just kidding, this is Libya before and after Obama destroyed it. What a fuck is that? And that is a tragedy. And this is what they've done all over the Middle East. And on that sad note, please like, subscribe, and share, and have a great evening.